Well, hello, hello. Welcome everyone to the X Place. I'm Alice, and you are here for the Game Founders Forum introductory video panel discussion. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the founder of the X Place, Maya Rand.
Hi,
Maya.
everybody. Thanks, Herrick, Shelby, Rade, Dave, and Alice for all being here. And thanks also Anders, who's also one of our leaders and is going to be kind of involved in leading this initiative. I wanted to kick us off by just talking about what is the Game Founders Forum and why did we decide to kick off this initiative now. So the idea for the Game Founders Forum is to have like a monthly gathering. It's like a monthly event series that's going to be designed and led by game founders and intended for game founders. In these event series, it's a first of all virtual gatherings, and we wanted to have seasoned entrepreneurs actually share from their experience, share their tribal knowledge, share their battle-tested strategies, and offer some powerful insights to the founders who are right now in the trenches and really trying to kind of thrive in this ever evolving gaming industry. We decided to do this now because like everybody else, we've been kind of witnessing what's happening in the market, right? So these are challenging times of layoffs and studio closures. And we see that with that, there are many more game devs who feel that there's nothing to lose and that now is the perfect time to leap into entrepreneurship and launch their own studio. And we wanted to back them because we believe entrepreneurship and new studios are going to be vital for revitalizing the games industry. Now, the statistics has always been kind of bad, if you will, right? Like 10% of startups will actually be able to survive past the first 3 years. And we think that in the reality of this challenging market, sharing the battle-tested wisdom, forming collaborations between former founders and existing founders, and kind of really having that strong network, that insider knowledge, that backing of a community isn't just going to be helpful, but it's going to be actually essential for survival. So with that, we kind of reached out to some really talented professionals, founders. Some of them are former founders, some of them are existing founders, and asked them to kind of step up and help us in leading and driving this initiative. And we're super thankful for Shelby and Dave and Rade and Anders and Herrick for really kind of stepping up and giving away from their time to lead this effort. And with that, I'm actually going to turn this to Shelby. And
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, Maya and Alice, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. I know all of us have some experiences that we'd love to share, and we're rooting for everybody out there who's doing this right now. As far as me, I've been in the game industry over 20 years. I've shipped over 30 games in a bunch of roles, from gameplay programmer and level designer to executive producer and game director. And I've been lately working on films about the game industry and sharing perspectives that you don't normally hear in films. So that's been very cathartic and fun. And I'm focused on mentorship a lot this year, which is one reason I was excited to be asked to do this. So let's go around. Herrick, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Herrick, Erickson-Brigl. I'm the CEO of a stealth startup. We're planning to announce our studio come March for GDC. I'm my background, I started at Vigil Games and then moved over to EA. I was a part of, I didn't ship them, I was in the live services side, but I was a part of over 100 game launches and then moved over to 2K, where I was a part of the sports family division. And I've worked on PGA, Lego 2K Drive, and a couple other games that are unannounced. After that, I decided this is a lot of fun. I want to make my own studio. So I reached out and I talked to some of my contacts, people that I'd worked with previously, and we started spinning up a studio together. And I'm really excited for this year because we have some really cool stuff cooking up.
That's really awesome. It's great to have you here.
Thank
Uh,
you.
let's let's go to Rade.
Hey everyone, I'm Rade Stojsavljevic. This is coming up on my 33rd year in the games business. I started when I was in college. I've worked on mobile, console, PC at Westwood Studios, Electronic Arts, Sony, Activision, done a startup before, and I just closed a publishing deal and started up another company. We're 3 weeks into it now. And really, like for me, what got me motivated to do this, when I left Meta, I built up with a good team there, the first party publishing group. We acquired Beat Games that did Beat Saber and bought 9 other companies over a couple of years and integrated that all in there. I left that and I really didn't like what I was seeing in the rest of the industry. Just between the way teams were being treated, products were being built, the sort of stagnation of ideas, and just frankly, the disrespect for creatives. And somebody I was having lunch with, a good friend of mine, he said, be the change you want to see. And I said, you know what? That's absolutely correct. It's one of my strongest motivations for starting my own company, and it's why I'm here talking to you all today.
That's amazing. I can't wait to hear about what you and Herrick are doing that we can't hear about yet. So looking forward to the future. Let's go to Dave. Oh, you're muted. Still
It's
muted.
only yeah, it's only been like 6 years of video calls. So we'll get there eventually. Dave Rosen. I've also been in the gaming industry for a bit over 20 years. My background's a little different in that I started in the marketing side of gaming, product marketing, and eventually brand marketing, and over time kind of moved into some some combination roles of general management and CEO roles. But I started my career with Electronic Arts, worked on a range of stuff, everything from the original Godfather game, Burnout games. I've worked on at this point pretty much every platform, every business model you can think of. Have worked on mobile. Most recently, I was on the founding team for Wemo Games. We were a mobile and then VR game development studio that unfortunately we had to shut down last year because we couldn't get continued funding. So this is near and dear to me, and part of why I'm here is that as Maya addressed, a big part of entrepreneurship is taking the risk that it may not work. And as I was going through the experience of shutting down a studio, I found there was very little discussion of that, very few resources for that. And I think that adds to the fear factor that stops people from starting new things. And so I think just getting out there and having conversations where you honestly talk about, what's hard, what's challenging, what might you face, really demystifies it and hopefully brings more people into the entrepreneurial side of gaming.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's so important. I think all of us are here because we have seen how mistakes and things that go wrong are actually what we learn and grow from. I also went through a similar experience of having to shut down our studio, and even that I had co-founded. And even though you go into it maybe knowing that most startups don't make it, it's still emotionally, it's very difficult to like really internalize that. And when it happens, it's processing the grief and the feelings of failure. And that's very difficult. But knowing that there are actually so many other people out there doing this can really help. So I think you all are doing an amazing thing here, sharing your experiences so that people can at least not feel so alone and kind of know where to go. So one of the reasons we are here today is to talk in depth about this idea that we hear, the current fundraising environment is terrible. And when we say current, a lot of us mean the last 1 year, 2 years that were really difficult. We ran into funding walls. I'd love to talk about what that means to you, if current means the last year, or if how you feel now, how you feel about the future. So let's start with Herrick.
So I think like what I'm doing right now, that's the first part of your question. I'm working with a team of veterans, and we're basically making the first product of our studio. Part of that is fundraising. So we have gotten a little bit of money into the company, and now we're looking to expand that. So part of what we're doing, and what I've found is that a lot of people are very interested in finding out whether or not you have a product that works. And the moment you have a product that works, a lot of doors start to open for you. So we have a playable first demo of our game. We also are making a playable demo of one of our USPs, unique selling points. And so one of the things that helps games to sell is your unique selling points. What makes your game unique? What makes your game stand out from the rest of the competition? And being able to showcase that to publishers and investors is a good way of showing like this is how I can get my game to sell. And it also helps to eliminate a lot of risk, which in the current environment that we're in, especially for fundraising, is very important. Eliminating risk, showing how this game can sell, showing how this can connect with people. It can help open doors. Did I answer your question? Sorry.
You did, and I have a follow-up question. I've been part of a lot of discussions debating about how important the idea versus the founding team is. And of course, I believe it's a blend because our investors at Double Loop, they liked our thesis and they liked where we were going, but they are investing in a team that can hopefully pivot and be smart about that. So what are your experiences around that? You mentioned something kind of around this. So how
I
much do you
actually
focus
have
on the game when you're finding investors?
So I have probably a decent answer to the first part of your question,
Okay.
and then I have an answer to the second part of your question as well. So the first part is how important is the founding team, right? And so the way that I've found it's important to frame your founding team is, do you have someone that can do the project management? Do you have someone that can do the game design? Do you have someone that understands art? And do you have someone that can program, that can lead like the tech team, the engineers? That can then put all of those pieces together. And if you have three out of those four, generally the moment you get money, you can find the fourth. But if you're really missing a key part, like for example, the CTO, the engineer, like the person who really understands the product, you're going to have a lot of trouble being able to find investment because investors or publishers may not have faith in a person who just has a cool idea. So I actually think that having a cool idea is not nearly as important as being able to show that you can implement a cool idea. The second
Definitely.
part of your question was how do you keep making your game while also searching for investment? And candidly, you have to have someone whose entire focus is that. And then maybe their focus is also on working with the game. And so I can tell you for my team, my focus is investment and also on the team, but I'm almost purely project management. And so I basically broke down all of the tasks that need to be performed in order to complete both the game and also to go and find investment as best that I could. And I keep my team away from the searching of money part. I made sure that we have enough money to keep us rolling, and then I let them know like this is where we're at, this is what we're doing. I'm very transparent with everyone, and so they have a lot of trust in the process. Candidly, I've also been very candid that this isn't a guarantee. We might not be able to find that funding, but I try to keep that as far away from development as possible because the two don't mix well together from what I found.
Those
Just
are all really good. Yeah, go ahead, Rade.
just to build on what Herrick said, one of the other things that's critical in any environment, but particularly today, is if your team doesn't have experience managing people, managing projects, managing money, no one is going to let you learn that on the job in this environment. It's not there. It's just too much risk. You could have the great idea, you could have for the product, you could figure out how to get it to market. You have the right team to build it, but if no one knows you're going to be able to deploy that properly, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah, well said. And in the current environment, as we were discussing, there's advice that is always given to founders about these things, but how much harder have you found it to be this year than in the past? And what do you think people are walking into at this point? And either Rade or Dave, jump in.
So I just closed a publishing deal and it took me a little over a year to do it. That's leveraging every single trick and contact and thing that I know on how to do that. I even changed the company such that I mean, it's still an idea I strongly believe on, of course, but it also like it's something that I know is an investable idea. Previously, before all this unpleasantry has happened in the industry, like I could call a bunch of people and say, hey, I've got this idea, I want to do something, and I would get calls back, or they would take meetings. Wouldn't necessarily close the funding on it, but when I did that this time, most people were like, any other time I would talk to you, I have nothing. I'm signing nothing. Doesn't matter what it is. Everyone has just turtled up. And that makes it extremely difficult and frustrating. Especially if you don't know the people involved and you don't have the context behind it, it just feels like a cold rejection, which sucks.
One of the
Right.
things that I've found that can be helpful in that kind of situation is like finding early investment from people like for example, angel investors who can help believe in the idea and have connections within either the investment sphere or the publishing sphere. For example, I'll tell you for my company, we don't have enough money to make our game yet, right? But we have enough money to keep us rolling right now. And part of that is that we can leverage the experience of the people involved to be able to get us more meetings and more connections with people that might be interested in investing in something like this. And sometimes that investment thesis doesn't necessarily have to be a games related investment thesis. And so if you have, for example, we're using something related to PDFs for one of our things. And so Adobe may be a group that we want to talk to, right? Because they do have an investment platform. And that's an example of how you might talk to people that you might not normally talk to that might be interested in what you're doing.
Maya, I know that you had it looked
Yeah,
like it's something you wanted to add about
I wanted to ask Rade. So Rade obviously has this illustrious 30-year career and has led kind of first-party studios, so definitely has all the accolades. And there's no doubt that he can, how do you say, produce the pudding, if you will. And I'm kind of curious because Rade mentioned that it took him a year to raise this funding. Rade, do you have a sense for how many publishers, investors, how many meetings did you need to take? Because I think that it would be really good to put this in perspective for people. I know, like, and I'm quoting some numbers from tech. One of the things that helped me when I started raising funding for TheXPlace, not a gaming studio, but also like a startup, was that someone shared, an early stage VC shared with us the statistics that you raise $100,000 for every 100 meetings you take. Get that number again, $100,000 for 100 meetings that you take. And that's a combination of angels, family offices, VCs, etc. And so I'm kind of curious, Rade, do you have a sense for how many meetings you needed to take in order to raise this
Yeah.
funding?
So I took an atypical path. I saw a very specific market opportunity that very few partners could actually do anything in. And I went after that specific thing doggedly until I got it. To get there, I probably took 30 to 40 meetings talking to people to shape my pitch, to get a sense of the market, to get a sense of whether or not I could get seed funding or angel funding before I went for the deal that I went for. Um, all of those fed in to ultimately getting the deal that I secured. Um, so like I wasn't trying to raise at all of those, though. Of course, if anyone came in and said, you know what, I'll give you 100,000 or a quarter million now on a seed round, I would have said yes because it would have gotten me started earlier. But none of them were actually willing to fund anything. But they gave information, which was really useful.
You're completely right. I mean, talking and forming those relationships outside the pressure of pitching is how you can refine your pitch, how you can find out what people are interested in. And then, yeah, the formal meetings, I'm not sure for us, it ended up being 100 per 100,000, but certainly the conversations up to meetings, it was hundreds. I wanted to go back to Dave, and I know Dave had and hear about your experiences over the last year and how how this has affected you and how it's been different than the past.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of actually build off what Rade was saying, that I had a lot of meetings. I did a lot of meetings that were, so I spent over a year, trying to raise incremental funding, and that was anything from, you know, uh, equity-based investment to partnership deals to strategic partnerships. kind of all different angles. We had a number of major partners that we were working with and, looking to increase our relationship there. Um, but, a lot of those meetings where I was talking to people in my network, people I've known for 5, 10, 20 years, a lot of them, the very first thing they'd say is, hey, we're not making additional investments right now. We're trying to keep the things that we invested in 2, 3, 4 years ago alive or find a way out. Um, and so there was definitely a layer of just recognizing that people just didn't have the money to invest. And I think it's to be determined, at what rate that starts to change. The other thing I think was different in my situation was, we followed the model, you know, even just 4 or 5 years ago, if you created a studio, you built several games, even if they weren't necessarily profitable, just having a studio that had demonstrated it could build games, particularly, speaking of the VR space, um, that you had a strong possibility for strategic partnerships or acquisition, right? There's a model to follow there around, to the point that was made earlier, demonstrating you could, I'm going to get Maya's expression wrong, but you could make the pudding. And so that's really the model we followed. And we did not expect we intentionally targeted making smaller games that we knew we could deliver on time, on schedule, high quality for the scope of experience, and really prove to partners we were a reliable, strong partner with great project management, great production values in our studio. And that the model historically had been, if you do that, the opportunities will be there. And it was not. We got caught in this sort of uncanny valley between the people who are willing to invest in an early idea with a maybe on a relative scale smaller investment, because you're just trying to get enough to get to that proof of concept, say, and people who only want to invest in, hey, is this thing out there? Is it profitable? Sure, we'll give you more money to press on the gas. And the whole market for kind of a studio that had shown they could do it, but had not independently become profitable, just vanished. And I know a number of other founders who wound up in a very similar situation. So I think that's one of the big changes, I think, to recognize is that, similarly, that kind of the model of create a work for hire studio, fund yourself that way, and then use your time on the side to build out the original idea and give yourself the runway. There's not work, there's far less work for hire work out there. We tried to go that route as well. And, we talked to publishers that traditionally use dozens of external studios, and they would say, hey, look, we just cut 10, 15, 20% of our teams. We're not going out and doing partnerships right now. Now, all that will eventually change, but that was my experience that I think was a little different, of kind of being caught in this expectation of an older model of, how you demonstrate viability of a studio that maybe doesn't hold anymore.
That's a really good description. And I will underline that and say that's exactly the shift that we saw at Double Loop in our 5 years of operation, where it was one thing when we started and it was something else when we ended. And we heard very similar, like, we can't invest anything. We're not spending any money that we don't have to. So essentially to save deals that they had. So we ran into a really similar wall. But as you were talking, I was hearing some terms that I know I didn't know before I went through fundraising with my own co-founder, Emily Greer, who had been through this before. You said some things like strategic partnership, and sometimes if you don't know that those mean a specific thing, they can kind of go by in conversation, and you don't realize you've heard something that has some specific connotation. So I was wondering if you or whoever wanted to sort of jump in and describe all the different types of funding and what those words mean.
I'll maybe just describe a couple and then, let others jump in as well. And I would note that also frequently, different people use a term to describe something slightly different. So, there's a layer of sometimes you just got to ask, but, equity investment, meaning somebody is putting money into the company for a percent ownership share. That's kind of the extent of the relationship. There can be variances there of other things they might bring to the table, if they have some capabilities, but in general, it's, cash for ownership. Strategic partnerships tend to be, things more like, going to a larger corporation who, say, has an IP that they want someone to build a game around. And so they're going to fund some or all of that game development and maybe give you access to an IP. And in return, you're going to take, some percentage of the revenue. And again, I'm simplifying it. Those deals can be structured in so many different ways. It's almost irresponsible of me to imply that there's sort of like that's what it is. Um, and I mean, I would kick it to Herrick and particularly to Rade, who I know has worked on kind of both sides of this numerous times. But I think it just speaks to that there's the range of types of investors that are everything from individuals who are angels to venture capital firms who are looking, for 100x return to a strategic partner like a major gaming corporation or hardware or software corporation that might be gaming adjacent they might have some other reason that they're investing. They might be trying to fill a portfolio hole. They might be trying to invest for a period of time with an aim toward ultimately an acquisition. These things can happen a lot of different ways. And I think just, kind of Shelby to the start of your question, I think one of the really important things you can do if you have not been through this fundraising process is find people who have and talk to them and just hear about different structures and, someone who you're not trying to raise money from, but just who, can talk to you about what they've seen, because it might give you some ideas of different ways to approach trying to keep things going.
I want to give a strong +1 to talk to people. Developers are at a strategic disadvantage. We do not know what deals look like because they're all secret. And you will never negotiate the best deal that you can unless you have an idea of what's possible, what's on the table. Like I've heard companies say, oh, we never do this, we never do that. Then I talk to someone else, he's like, no, I have it, it's in my contract, here's how I got it. So have those discussions, you'll learn a lot. With regards to the funding sources, venture capital is fueled by future exits, right? And so unless there is some indication that there's merger and acquisition, M&A activity, it's really unlikely that you're going to get VC money. The strategic investment, strategic partnership thing is really interesting because there's a lot of IP and that's not fully utilized, particularly with generations of people that want to consume that IP and live in those worlds in different ways. And those companies that have it, most of the time don't know how to do that. And so they need help. And that comes in, that's where startups and developers can come in. I saw Herrick had his hand up.
Yeah, you had mentioned knowing deals and knowing like what deals might be possible and knowing how they might be structured. I want to mention the opposite, which is kind of something you also touched on, which is most developers don't understand how deals can be structured or what deals might be possible, and hone in on the fact that most developers don't know how bad a deal can possibly be for them. Um, and so, highly recommend one of the first things that you do is find a lawyer who is a game industry lawyer and put any deal that you were thinking about signing in front of them because you're signing up for a marriage for the next 3 years and $1,000 to $1,500 just to make sure that you're not signing your life away is going to save a massive headache in the long run. Additionally, talking to friends, you had mentioned talking to friends, both of you is a really good idea. I am so fortunate that I have so many friends in the game industry who are willing to offer advice. And candidly, if you're not approaching someone, asking them for a deal, asking them for a connection, and all you're doing is saying, can you just give me some advice? Most people are just willing to give you like 30 minutes of their time. They're willing to just jump into a call and just give you some advice. If you are literally not saying, hey, can you introduce me to your friend because I want to talk to your friend because I want their money, like that's a terrible way to start a conversation. But instead, if you just say, look, I don't know what I'm doing here. I have this thing. This thing is very confusing to me. Can you just give me your point of view? That so many people in the game industry are so willing to just do that. I can't tell you the number of people that have been willing to just jump into a call and give me advice. And so I co-sign that plus 1,000.
Same
I
here.
would
I see.
just,
Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in on that and say kind of the inverse to a degree, which is I 100% agree. Like people are willing to give advice. I am, happy to make myself available. You would be shocked how many people reach out to me, say they want to talk through this process, just get some advice, pick my brain. And their fundamental question is, what's the phone number of the person who will give me the money? So,
Yeah.
if you are hoping there is someone you can talk to who will just say, "Oh, if you only call this person, they will be happy to give you thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars," that's not going to happen. It's going to be a process. It's going to be based on your individual situation and company and idea. And so, when you are reaching out and talking to people, um, know that you're getting advice, know that you're getting perspective, but someone else is not going to be able to give you the magic answer. There's just no other answer than to grind and get through it.
And just to kind of add a little bit more to what you said, what you can get out of those meetings with people who have done it before is direction. Because candidly, when I started, I didn't even know the right questions to ask. And as I started talking to people, I learned the right questions to be asking. Because really, what's more important is not the answer, it's the question. Because, like, if you talk to an investor and you're not asking them what their investment thesis is, if you're not asking them what do you normally invest in, what actually gets like money, like you may just be talking to the wrong investor. And that's just something I didn't know when I started.
So many great points here. That one I want to underline as well. Every investor has a different thesis, and understanding their thesis will save you so much time because they may like you as a person, they may like the idea, but if the thesis for their fund doesn't match what you're doing, then the chances of investment are much lower. And also, I wanted to spend a little more time talking about that idea of talking to people, and how building meaningful relationships is so much different and better than shallow just networking, like go to a networking event. And that's, I think a lot of us have the fortune of having many years of in-person time in studios before a lot of us went remote work. So my best friends and the people I talk to are people that I built stuff with. And so personally, I find that to be one way to really meaningfully build relationships is to do stuff together, build stuff, do game jams, go to events and, help people and as well as asking for help when you need it. And I wanted to ask you all, what's your perspective on that these days?
Uh, for me, it's shifted a bit because what you're saying is absolutely valuable, and I happen to like my best friend growing up happens to be a successful studio head in this industry, and it's nice to have someone to say, Roddy, you're being a dumbass. Don't do that. And he has no qualms about doing that for me, and I'll do it for him. And it's very good to have that. I started volunteering to do mentorship through Amir Satvat's spreadsheet on LinkedIn. That guy is a gift to the industry. I can't thank him enough. And I've met some really interesting people there. And tying into what Dave and Herrick said, the question that you ask is going to determine the kind of response and engagement you get. Like if someone calls me up and says, "Hey, connect me with someone giving you money," I'm like, first off, that person doesn't exist. If you know them, message me. I would love to meet that person. But even if they did, I'm not going to waste someone's time referring someone that I don't know, because like that's my name on that. But more importantly, I'm going to decide how much time I want to invest mentoring, right? If you ask me really good thought-provoking questions, I'm getting out of it as much as hopefully you're getting out of it as well. And and like nobody does it for free. There's altruism involved, absolutely, but really smart people who know how to ask good questions will jar something loose in anybody's head, and that's really valuable. So kind of focus on what you're doing, the problems, and Shelby, to your point, I haven't known these people, but I've built connections with them really, really quickly just by diving right into some shared issues that we've had and kind of working that problem virtually. And then I ran into them at GDC, which was freaking awesome. So you can always follow up with that.
I agree with you. Yeah, that's been really amazing. People who ask really great questions, you have an interesting conversation. Um, and just find those ways to have meaningful conversations that aren't just show up and have a drink at a happy hour or something. That's a way to see your people but harder to meet new people that way. Looks like Herrick has his hand up.
Yeah, so I think it might be valuable to share how I got some of the early investment into my studio. I won't name names or anything like that, but I will kind of explain the process that I went through that I think really aligns with a lot of things that Dave and Rade and Shelby yourself have been saying, which is it started with an introduction from someone who knew the person. And I was actually a secondary pitch when I arrived, and so I wasn't even the person that they were supposed to pitch to. But I pitched to them, and then afterwards I followed up with them. I said, I really appreciate your time. Do you mind if we like just show you our pitch again and just get some more feedback? And we then went and we did exactly that. We got some great feedback from him. And then a little while later, he sent me a message and asked me if I wanted to go for drinks. And so I went to drinks and he talked to me for like 3 hours about uh, my vision for the studio, where we were going, and what we were making. And candidly, he was not a game industry investor, but he really, really liked what we were talking about. And so after our meeting for drinks, we left, and then he asked me to come to lunch with him. And so I went to lunch with him, and he made me an offer, and it was an offer that I would be very stupid to refuse. And so what this means, and the reason why I bring this up is I don't think anyone's really going to invest in you in the current atmosphere without knowing you, without knowing what you're about, what your studio's about, where you're going, what you're doing, and what your vision is. And also, like, do you know what you're doing? Like, actually know, like, can you talk passionately about what you're making? And these are things that I think were very helpful to us and will also be helpful to us in the future. So thought that might be helpful.
Definitely. One of my personal projects is a film called Resting Pitch Face, which is specifically about the obstacles that women face in fundraising. And I wanted to bring that up, that women receive less than 2% of VC money. Black founders receive around 0.3%. It's tiny. And a lot of the things you guys are talking about are really true for everyone. I did want to acknowledge that there are some it's like it was hard 5 years ago. It's 100 times harder now for everyone. It's 1,000 times harder for women and other marginalized founders. And I know from my experience, one of the biggest pieces of an investment thesis, going back to what we were talking about, is whether someone is a repeat founder. So that ties into what you're talking about. Like, do you know what you're doing? So for myself, like starting Double Loop Games, I knew everything about game dev. I had led, top to bottom, done everything on the game dev side, never having founded. And I partnered up with someone who was a repeat founder who had a successful exit. And that made all the difference, of course, in her knowing what we were doing, but also just that people knew who she was. So I think talking about the importance of who you are co-founding with is something to talk about. And I know that was a little bit of a tangent off of how hard it is for women, but I think for anyone, just there is a little bit, in my opinion, there is this sort of invisible piece that's like a founder who has done it before is going to knock down some walls that you and everyone will encounter otherwise.
I love the name of your movie, just as a side note.
Thank you.
I think that's an awesome name.
Thank you. It's been, I made it, I'm expanding it, I'm fundraising for it, but yeah, the name kind of tells you what it is. And I guess the way that I mean that the way that having a repeat founder connects to being a woman is that if the funding keeps going back to repeat founders and there aren't other people brought into it, then it tends to be cyclical. So I wanted to bring that up because we've been talking about how important is the strength of the idea, how important is the strength of the team, and just to say and acknowledge that a repeat founder is like some percentage of the calculation every VC that I know does on whether they should invest. So to think about that.
One of the
So
things I've heard is who's the gray hair at the table?
Hadn't heard
And
that.
that was that came from one of the people that I worked with. So
That's awesome.
two things on that. One, I think we should absolutely acknowledge that there are certain groups of founders that are going to have a degree of difficulty multiplier in getting money. It sucks It's a thing, and like we could spend an entire hour talking about that. Maybe we should at some point. Um, on the co-founder thing, I got into an interesting debate with someone about this on LinkedIn. So I was part of 10 acquisitions at when I was at Meta, and the one consistent thing that I saw is solo founder companies had a really hard time. First off, to the point that everyone made, like you need complementary skills, particularly in this environment, to help get anything done. Second, like it is a lonely job. You could bring in talent, but you're never going to have somebody that you could share like some of your problems with to the degree that you can with a co-founder. And if you ever make it far enough to get acquired, the integration work is monumental to keep your company and your team intact with whatever organization you wind up joining. And having a partner that knows the org and can help evangelize your values is huge. I would not go it alone. So I told you it took a year for me to get a publishing deal. It took another 8 months to get to the point where I went after the publishing deal. I was adamant about wanting a co-founder. My first co-founder that I identified was all set to go, and then his previous business that he was part of that he'd left started to rocket ship up, and he's like, "Hey, I got to go back and close this one out." No hard feelings. And then I had to start from square one looking for a co-founder.
I
Yeah.
co-sign everything you said about good co-founders and like making it not feel lonely, because I can't tell you how nice it is to be able to just gripe to someone who understands what I'm going through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and I
frankly, like the first time I did it, like I was the only guy running payroll and I wanted to take a vacation. So I'm sitting in Hawaii with my laptop running payroll. The tools sucked at the time. That was not fun. Now I've got a founder where like, oh, guess what? My kid's sick. I got to go deal with that. He takes up the slack, vice versa. Um, like the load balancing alone is a huge value add.
yeah,
I also,
I think there's a sense I see sometimes people get caught in the sort of, but I have this idea and sort of I don't want to share it. And the idea may be great, but it's ultimately not going to come to anything if you can't bring it into the world and get it funded. And having great co-founders, enables that. And I think similarly, I know people who feel precious, think, oh, I shouldn't introduce this person to that person because what if I want to go pitch something to them? Again, every situation is different. The more introducing someone to someone awesome gives you such a huge credibility boost that if that person is a real investor, they'll be more than happy to talk to you about a second investment, even if they invest in the first thing, like supporting one another, helping one another. The situation with funding for, female and minority founders is infuriating. I wish I was a VC because I would start a fund to do just that. And I think it would be, like we're seeing in women's sports today, where suddenly the world woke up to that this is hugely valuable and the valuations are skyrocketing far faster than
yeah.
they are in traditional men's sports. And that's going to happen in gaming at some point. The
Yeah.
penny's going to drop. I wish I had the millions to go and do it today. It's really terrible for our industry.
Part of it is awareness about it because there is research showing how much higher the ROI is when you have a female co-founder at least. But I wanted to go back to the co-founding just to share a little bit. One thing is that your co-founder is in some ways going to be just as entangled with you financially and legal as a married or a spouse in real life. So I was, my co-founder, Emily, she and I knew each other, but I just wanted to mention what we went through, making sure you have the right co-founder is so important. So we spent several months, which we called co-founder dating, where we kind of kept getting together, trying to have the hard conversations through the summer, make sure we're on the same page. We had several moments throughout those years where we were like, maybe we agree or don't agree, but our core values, we're both ethical people and we trust each other's ethics at the core. And you have to be able to fall back on that because the partnership needs to last you through the hard times, not just the good times. And so I just really, when you're thinking about a co-founder, anyone who's starting, it's not just the skills, it's really like just remember how entangled you're going to be with that person for years. And it's really important.
I have one of my co-founders. I have three, and I adore every single one of them. But I jokingly call my CTO my emotional support mic because I can call him at any time and I can just like unload on him. And at the end he's like, "You done? You good?" I'm like, "Yeah. Great, man. Talk to you later." That's it.
I was
It's so helpful.
I was shocked. So like I got introduced to my co-founder. I hadn't worked with him before, and we clicked right away. And then while we were going through getting this deal, deals ebb and flow. Like, hey, great, we're gonna get it. Oh shit, it got delayed again. Are we gonna get it? This might fall apart. And we would flip back and forth between like the cheerleader and the depressed person. Like 1 week it would be him, 1 week it would be me, and just the fluidity of how that happened. Like, I'm like, okay, this was a great find. Like John is like the perfect partner. This is really, really good. But to something we talked about before, get a really good lawyer, because I've had a bad co-founder before, and that could go south really, really quick. Make sure your incorporation docs are like just dialed in, because if that goes bad, your company's done.
Co-signed. I love it.
Yep. And having everything clean in the beginning is so much better long term. You have to do a lot of due diligence when you do accept investment. And due diligence includes, is your accounting in order? Is everything there? And so just starting from the beginning cleanly is really important. I know we've got just like a couple minutes left. Is there anything anyone wanted to share before we wrap up?
Um, I don't want to be doom and gloom about the current environment because it sucks. One of the things I would like to touch on, and one of the besides having a good idea and wanting to make the industry better, one of the selfish reasons for me doing a startup is I think sometime in the near future, and I cannot predict when, I don't think anyone can, publishers and platforms are going to look around and say, oh shit, we don't have content. We cut our teams too deep. It's going to take too long to prime it. The customers want it. What are we going to do? And the only way you're going to be able to cram 3, 4, 5 years worth of development into a shorter time and fill your pipeline with content is to buy some companies that are starting up. That is going to happen. I do not know when. So maybe this is the perfect time. Maybe it's 6 months or a year too early to start something. I have no idea. But like gaming as a whole is not going down. The dollars being spent are only going in one direction, up, maybe a little bit slower. And I know there's not enough content coming.
I think you're absolutely right. And all of us have been in the industry so long to see how cyclical it is with companies shutting down, seeding in startups, growing. It is a harder time than it's ever been in the 2 decades I've been doing it. But I think you're absolutely right to look forward, and that's a really nice ray of potential hope that you are leaving us with. So thank you very much. It's been amazing to have everyone's time here. I'll pass it back to Alice or Maya.
I'm so grateful to all of you for your time to share, but also just for your transparency and genuine sharing of life experiences and on your journey here. And I know that there's going to be folks watching this and listening that it's going to be a game changer for them. It's going to be several aha moments there on the journey. So we thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the next TheXPlace event. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.